Hey, everybody, it's Friday. Thank God it's Friday. Thank God we're back. The week is over. We can all look towards the weekend and begin to think of relaxing. I'm David Solomon. And I want to welcome you to another edition of the Rant Network, where this is a podcast that is simply unfiltered, uncensored, live every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at noon Eastern, where we're talking about a wide range of topics. The podcast is really dedicated for you, to give you a chance to express your opinions, share your thoughts, experiences, ideas, and hear from a variety of various perspectives and honest opinions. Join us generally where it's you, me, and myself, and Stuart Brisgell, where we dive into the latest news, pop culture, politics, so much more. We rant about the absurdity of modern life, which I will talk about today, to discussion about the deeper issues affecting our society. That too, I'm going to reflect on. We've got you covered, so sit back, relax, and enjoy today's journey of exploration and discovery here on the Rant Network. Well, ladies and gentlemen, today is June 23rd, and it's a Friday. And had this been June 24th here in Quebec, the entire province would be shut down, pretty much. It's La Fête Nationale, the national holiday for Quebec. And unfortunately, it is a reminder and a constant reminder to the English and to the ethnic communities that we are not Quebecers. Now, it's funny because when you talk to somebody who lives in other parts of Canada, they say we're Canadian, but we're from Ontario. We're Canadian from BC, Alberta, you name it. Even in the United States, I might be a Texan, but I'm an American. The problem is Quebec has decided to distinguish itself. And a lot of it, of course, has to do with the fact that this is a French society. And I'm not taking anything away from that. I agree. The majority of Quebec is French. And as such, there should be more inclination towards French language within Quebec. However, to propel French, they decided that they had to turn the English community simply into the enemy. Now, this is news, by the way. This is not new. This has been going on for about a century. Maurice Duplessis, one of the first premiers of Quebec, he did it great job in the 30s and 40s using hate politics. He went after anybody who was not francophone and to create them as the enemy. And it's ironic because one of those enemies, the Americans, he used to talk about how the Americans are terrible and how the Americans are invading and Americans are going to take over. And in his mandates, there were more American companies setting up shop in Quebec than in any other time. So it's funny how you can play both sides, right? And that is exactly what Maurice Duplessis did. And all of his successors watched that and said, hey, there might be a formula here. Now, there was some quiet along the front from Duplessis for decades to come. Jean Lesage changed Quebec here with the Quiet Revolution back in the 1960s. But all along, it was always us, Quebecers, French Canadians, versus them, English, big monsters, the enemy. Now, I've had numerous French Canadians tell me when they grew up in the 60s and 70s that the priest would stand at the pulpit on a Sunday and criticize the English as running Canada at the expense of the French Canadians, and it was the Jew who was stealing money from them because they controlled the banks. I mean, it was this hate politics that came from the politicians and the pulpit. Nothing's changed, folks. In 1976, the Parti Québécois came to power after Robert Bourassa's Liberals lost. Robert Bourassa tried to pass really a charter of Quebec French legislation. It was a light legislation, a law to try to create French as more a predominant language. And it made a lot of sense. If you read the philosophy, if you read the essence of the first bill, which Camille Laurent brought out in 1977, the Charter of French Language, in 1977, and if you strip out the politics, it makes a hell of a lot of sense. Essentially, Bill 101 was to make sure that civil administration, health services, social service would be provided in French. The right to speak French in deliberative assemblies, the right of workers to carry on their activities in French, the right of consumers to be informed and served in French, and the right of persons eligible for instruction in Quebec to receive that instruction. The philosophy made sense. Preserve French. It went a step further. And even for education, no longer would we learn English as a first language. We would learn English as a second language, French mother tongue, but the hours dedicated to French was expanded. The hours to English, depending on your grade, was either 0 or a couple of hours a day or a week. And the oddity of that language law, when even, actually, let me go before I do that. It went a step further. Businesses can no longer have English signs. Street signs were no longer allowed to be in French. I'm sorry, in English. In fact, if you drove on the street and you saw arrête, which meant stop, or you saw the word stop, which, by the way, in France means stop, then, and only then, was it okay. But if you had stop and arrête on the same sign, that was bilingual and that was illegal. Okay. So from all this philosophy and all this stuff, it made sense. But the Quebec government decided to go a step further, and this is what made it harder. They put out the Office de la langue française, the language office, which then employed thousands and thousands of inspectors who went into businesses, schools, to check and to validate that you were not using English. That's right, you weren't using English. If you used Chinese and French, that was okay. If you used Italian and French, that was okay. But if you used English in French, it was not okay. And the language police, as we dubbed them, would go around from business to business going after English businesses. There's a bakery not far away from here where he listed welcome in a ton of languages, and the office wanted him to take it down because it had English on it. It should have only been in French. On one hand, where it backfired, Bill 101, is it made people like me, who started elementary school then, fully bilingual. It, unfortunately, maintained Quebecers unilingual French and had a hard time with becoming bilingual. The backfire. But in the meantime, the us versus them mentality continued. And the longer that this went on, the more English people were pitted as the enemy. So despite the fact that people like myself became fully bilingual, we were never accepted as Quebecers fully because we weren't pure laine, as they used. Pure laine almost came across like what the Nazis did about the Aryan race. Pure laine means you are pure, a pure Quebecer. I'm not accepted in that mark, even though I'm fully bilingual. My children aren't accepted and they're fully bilingual. Didn't matter. And as time progressed, the government went after other opportunities to go after the non-francophones, trying to secularize. And this was Bill 25. Now, the PQ tried to do it by saying, we're not going to have any religious symbols. You can't wear anything, whether it's jewelry, clothing, on your head, no crosses, no kippas, no hijabs, no niqabs, nothing if you work for the public sector. Consequently, one example is there's a shortage of 1,000 teachers. But if you're a Muslim and you wear a hijab, you can't teach. You have to take it off. This is the mindset, us versus them. And the most recent one, the Bill 96. This is the law that was just passed by the latest government here. Again, an us versus them. In the middle of a pandemic, while we're all at home struggling, pressure cooker, they passed a new set of legislation to eliminate English even further. Where once it was 50 employees in a business that had to have everything in French, including the keyboards, the software, your memos, your emails, that now went down to 25. Immigrants would come here and would be given a grace period of which they could get services in English, but after 6 months, if they have to take classes, otherwise no more services in English. Can't send your kids to English school. That's right. You can't. People like myself who were born and raised here, went to school here in English, I could send my kids to school here. I have a paper that allows me to do it, but immigrants cannot, even if they went to school in English. Even if they went to school in Canada in English, doesn't matter. Take it a step further now, where we now have to declare French skill sets. And take it a step further, where if I want government services, from my municipality, I have to prove that I am an English native from Quebec. I cannot get English services, not from Revenue Quebec, not from the Quebec government, and I almost have to fight to get it from a municipality, even though it has bilingual status. If I want to sign a contract with with a customer, I have to provide it in French, or actually it's and I have to have it in French and in English, as long as they was first seen in French and they requested it to be provided bilingual. I cannot send an English only contract if I want to do business in Quebec. This is the big round of applause that has happened here as we celebrate Fête Nationale in 2023. More and more English people are now talking as they did in 1977, 76, 1980, when the referendum hit. It's time to go. Quebec tried to separate twice, failed twice, and this government isn't ashamed to say that they might want to try a third time. All about us versus them. It's funny how everybody says, a lot of people say, I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of people say that Donald Trump created and invented hate politics. It's full of shit. They did not. He may have perfected it, but he didn't create it. Hate politics has been going around for generations. Since democracy was invented, it was about to get elected, you got to have an enemy. And now here we are today as English minority, shrinking. I mean, imagine, if you will, after the 1995 referendum in which the separatist side lost, the then premier stood up at the speech and said the reason we lost this referendum was because of the ethnics and the money. Who do you think he was accusing? Us versus them. The English community is more and more being marginalized in Quebec, despite Montreal wanting to, should be a bilingual city. Even the mayor of Montreal is going, rah, 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 French, French, French. Even though 40% of Quebec taxes collected comes from the English community, that's barely 20% of the Quebec population. If that goes, what do you do? In late 70s, early 80s, when businesses just exited out of Quebec, it caused a massive economic hit. But again, we just blame. And Justin Trudeau with Bill C-13 and his idiot liberals and a lot of other politicians voted to preserve Bill 96, to preserve the charter for the Quebec nation. Read the context, folks. Quebec nation means French. Trudeau understood that if I can convince French Canadians that the English community is still the enemy, you'll vote for me, not the Bloc Québécois. So as we get into the weekend of La Fête Nationale, Saint Jean Baptiste weekend, if I wanted to go and see all the signs and all the welcome, information about the parties and whatever, I won't find it in English. Not from the Quebec government. My municipality will post it in English as well as French because we're a bilingual municipality. But I'm not going to be really welcome because I'm not pur laine. Je suis pas un vrai Québécois. I'm not a real Quebecer for them. And even the most educated French Canadians are spewing this stuff. It's shocking. It's shocking how many French Canadians of, smart people believe this rhetoric. The province is heading in the wrong direction. And this language fight and the us versus them mindset is going to destroy Quebec. And that's the sad, sad statement. And that is why I no longer feel at home in Quebec. Well, that's all for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to the Rant Network. We hope you enjoyed this conversation and gained some valuable insight. We certainly appreciate your support, and we hope you'll join us again next time, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, noon Eastern. Hey, folks, we launched a brand new website. You could see many of our back episodes, watch it, listen to it, download it, you name it. Like us, share us on social media. We really need your help to get the word out about what we do around here. Until Monday, ladies and gentlemen, keep on listening, keep on ranting,